The scent of pine and sawdust is my anchor now. It's a clean, honest smell that settles deep in my lungs, a far cry from the stale office air and the acrid tang of fear that used to cling to me like a second skin. Here, in this cabin high above Denver, I plane a piece of oak, the rasp of the blade against the grain a rhythmic meditation. Each stroke is deliberate, each joint precisely fitted. It's a slow process, this rebuilding, but I've learned that slow is often the truest path to strength. My hands, once accustomed to drafting pens and structural calculations, now bear the calluses of a craftsman. They feel more honest somehow. It's been years since Natalie walked into my life, leaving a trail of wreckage that nearly consumed me. Sometimes, especially in the quiet twilight hours when the mountains cast long shadows, I can still feel the ghost of her touch, the phantom echo of her lies. I trace a knot in the wood, a flaw I'll work around, just as I've learned to work around the deep, unyielding scar she left behind. I was Christopher, the meticulous civil engineer, the man of order and logic, proud of the bridges and buildings that bore my company's mark. Now I'm just Christopher, a man who knows intimately how quickly the ground beneath your feet can turn to quicksand, and how a meticulously constructed life can crumble at the hands of a single beautiful deception. I thought I was building her a future. Instead, she built a cage for me, brick by brick, with my own hands. It started as these things often do, innocently enough. I frequented the same coffee shop every morning before heading to the office. It was part of my routine, as predictable as the sunrise. Then Natalie started working there. She was new, a fragile bird with wide, earnest eyes that seemed to hold a world of hurt. Her hands, when she handed me my latte, trembled slightly, and her smile, though bright, never quite reached her eyes. I notice these things because I notice details. It's the nature of my profession. One blustery October morning the coffee machine sputtered, delaying my order. Natalie, flustered, started apologizing profusely. I waved it off, telling her not to worry. That's when she looked at me, really looked at me, and some dam seemed to break. She started to talk, haltingly at first, then with a rush of words, about escaping a violent motorcycle gang in California, about needing to disappear, to make a new life for herself and her young son Jamie. Her voice was soft, laced with a fear that felt palpable. She spoke of threats, of constantly looking over her shoulder. She was a single mother, no family, just trying to outrun a past that refused to let her go. My heart, usually so guarded, a vault of logic and reason, fractured a little. I saw not a barista, but a woman in desperate need, a victim deserving of protection. I felt a profound, almost paternal sense of responsibility stir within me. I was a man who built things, who solved problems, who brought order to chaos. Here was a human problem, raw and immediate. I told myself it was my duty. I told myself I could help her forge that new safe life. I could be her protector, shield her from her past. The thought filled me with a quiet, satisfying purpose, a different kind of construction than I was used to, but one that felt deeply meaningful. I wanted to be the strong, unwavering foundation she so desperately lacked. Looking back, the red flags weren't crimson banners waving in the wind. They were subtle, like faint whispers on a breeze, easily dismissed by a man so eager to believe in his own benevolence. Her story, while heart-wrenching, had a dramatic sweep to it, a cinematic quality that, in hindsight, felt almost too perfect. She never offered specific details about the gang, always just a vague, terrifying them. Her gratitude was immense, almost overwhelming, but it felt genuine at the time, a reflection of her profound relief. I rationalized the inconsistencies as trauma, the vagueness as a need for secrecy. My desire to protect her was so strong, it built walls around my skepticism. It wasn't long before I offered her a job. My firm, Christopher & Associates, was a well-respected civil engineering company. I created an administrative assistant position for her. Light duties, something to get her on her feet without overwhelming her. I found her a small, affordable apartment in a safe neighborhood, helped with the deposit, and even bought some furniture. Jamie, her son, was a quiet, sweet boy, no older than 7, who seemed to blossom under the newfound stability. Seeing him smile, seeing Natalie relax, even just a little, solidified my conviction that I was doing the right thing. This wasn't charity, I told myself. This was an investment in a human life. It made me feel good, truly good, in a way my successful career rarely did. The psychological pressure started subtly, a slow tightening of the screws. Natalie became increasingly reliant on me, not just for work, but for emotional support, for advice on everything. She'd call me sometimes late in the evening, panicking about a car she thought she saw or a strange sound outside her apartment. Each time I'd reassure her, often driving over to check on her, my heart pounding with a mixture of concern and a strange, almost exhilarating sense of being needed. She'd apologize profusely afterward, tears welling in her eyes, telling me I was the only person in the world she could trust. the only one standing between her and utter despair. Then came the subtle shifts, the blurring of lines. She started hinting that her old life, the gang, wasn't quite as far behind as we'd hoped. "Christopher," she'd say, her voice barely a whisper, her eyes wide with manufactured fear. "I think they're looking for me. Someone was asking about new construction projects, big ones, the kind your company handles." She'd make it sound like the gang was trying to track her down through the networks she knew, and that my company, by extension, was now unknowingly tangled in her past. It was a clever move, transforming her problem into our problem, making me feel personally vulnerable and thereby more invested. She started to make requests that felt slightly off. "Can you check the blueprints for the new city expansion?" Not for work, she'd assure me, but because she thought her old associates might try to hide out in undeveloped areas, and she wanted to know which parts of the city were still considered safe zones for her and Jamie. Or could I provide her with the construction schedules for the highway overhaul project? She needed to know which routes to avoid, she claimed, because those kinds of people tended to frequent certain areas when big jobs were underway. My stomach would tighten, a cold knot forming, but she'd be so distraught, so convincingly terrified that my rational mind would step aside, overridden by the desperate need to alleviate her fear to protect her and Jamie. I told myself it was a small price to pay for their safety. What harm could it do? The defining moment, the one that still burns with a searing clarity, happened just a few months before everything exploded. We were working on the blueprints for a massive multi-million-dollar civic center project, a crowning achievement for my firm. Natalie came into my office late one evening, long after everyone else had left. Her face was pale, her hands visibly shaking. She held a local newspaper clipping, an article about an arrest of a low-level gang member from California, a man she claimed she knew. "They're getting closer, Christopher," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He knows I'm here. He knows I worked for you, that you helped me." She dissolved into tears, clutching my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "They're going to try to find me through you, through the projects. They know you handle sensitive infrastructure." She then spoke of an old, obscure safe house, a hideout she had known of, that was supposedly within the perimeter of our upcoming civic center project. She claimed she needed the detailed structural blueprints, the deep schematics, not just for a vague safe zone, but to pinpoint weaknesses, entry points, escape routes. Just in case, she needed to show the authorities where her old associates might try to set up an operation within a new structure. It was a complex, convoluted story, but it was delivered with such raw, convincing terror that I felt my resolve crumble. I hesitated, the ethics of my profession screaming in my head. These were proprietary, highly sensitive documents. They contained information about security systems, access points, structural integrity, data that could be catastrophically exploited. "Natalie," I started, my voice strained. "I can't just hand over." "Christopher," she interrupted, her eyes brimming. "Please, you're the only one if they catch me. Jamie has no one. You swore you'd protect us. This isn't for them, it's for us. It's to stop them before they use your buildings, your plans to find me." She made me feel like the security of my own projects, and by extension my own reputation, was dependent on her. She made me believe that giving her these plans was not a betrayal of trust, but an act of preventative protection, an act of defending my own domain. She cried, she begged. She looked at me with an utterly desperate, drowning helplessness. I remember the cold sweat prickling my scalp, the sick lurch in my stomach. My gut was screaming no, but my brain, clouded by fear and the crushing weight of her reliance, silenced it. I believed, truly believed, that I was protecting her, Jamie, and even my own firm from a hypothetical nebulous threat that only she seemed to fully grasp. I walked over to the secure server, my fingers trembling slightly as I accessed the files. I copied them onto an encrypted drive, handing it to her, my voice barely above a whisper. "Be careful, Natalie. This is everything." She hugged me then, tightly, her body pressed against mine, whispering profuse thanks, telling me I was her hero, her guardian angel. The knot in my stomach tightened, but her gratitude for a brief fleeting moment felt like a powerful bomb. I had made an irreversible choice, blinded by a manipulative narrative, convinced I was doing good. The breaking point arrived like a thunderclap on a clear day. I was in a meeting reviewing bids for a new municipal airport expansion, when the world outside my soundproof office shattered. Sirens wailed, loud and insistent, followed by the urgent thump of heavy boots in the hallway. A team of federal agents, grim-faced and official, stormed into my office. They carried badges and a warrant that might as well have been a death sentence. "Christopher Hayes?" the lead agent asked, his voice devoid of inflection. "We're seizing all computers, servers, and documents related to Christopher and Associates. You're considered a person of interest in a federal investigation." My mind reeled. person of interest investigation. My pristine, law-abiding world was collapsing around me. They took my laptop, my phone, even the pen from my hand. I watched, numb, as they systematically dismantled my office, my life's work. The agents didn't answer my frantic questions, just told me to cooperate. My employees, bewildered and terrified, whispered behind cupped hands. The humiliation was immediate, profound. It was hours later, in a sterile interrogation room, that the truth, ugly and raw, was finally laid bare. The agent, a woman with tired eyes but an unwavering gaze, laid out the facts like pieces of a broken mirror. Natalie, she had vanished, gone without a trace, taking Jamie with her, and the truth, Natalie was never truly out of the gang. She was an embedded informant, not for the feds, but for her former associates. She had been gathering intelligence for them, using Christopher and Associates as a front for their illicit operations. My company, my reputation, my meticulous work, all of it had been a tool. The blueprints I had so carefully, so reluctantly handed over, they weren't for a safe house or escape routes. They were for elaborate theft and sabotage schemes. They had used my sensitive schematics to bypass security systems, to plan entry and exit points, to understand structural weak spots for demolition, across multiple large-scale construction projects in the region. My highway schedules, the safe zones for Jamie, they were used to coordinate highly organized heists of equipment and materials, timing their operations to avoid patrol routes and maximize their gains. She played you, Mr. Hayes, the agent said, her voice softer now, almost pitying. She used your good nature, your desire to help, to access sensitive information. Your firm facilitated criminal activities whether you knew it or not. My head swam. The room spun. The floor felt like it was tilting, sending me off balance. Everything she had ever told me, every tear, every panicked call, every vulnerable confession was a calculated lie. My profound sense of responsibility, my protective instinct had been twisted, weaponized against me. I wasn't a protector. I was an accomplice. An unwitting, foolish, utterly ruined accomplice. The sheer depth of the betrayal hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. My stomach clenched, bile rising in my throat. I felt cold, utterly, devastatingly cold. The face of Jamie, that sweet, quiet boy, flashed in my mind. Was he in on it too? Or was he another victim, an innocent pawn in his mother's cruel game? The thought was a fresh stab of pain. My reputation, my career, my entire identity, shattered. The days and weeks that followed were a blur of shame, anger, and a pervasive, crippling paranoia. Every knock at the door sent my heart leaping into my throat. Every stranger's glance felt like an accusation. I couldn't sleep. When I did, nightmares of Natalie's calculating eyes, of federal agents seizing my life, haunted me. The public humiliation was unbearable. My name, once synonymous with integrity and excellence, was dragged through the mud. News reports painted me as a dupe, a fool, or worse, a willing co-conspirator. My employees, once loyal, looked at me with a mixture of fear and disappointment. My emotional collapse was complete. I barely ate, barely spoke. The vibrant world I had known shrank to the four walls of my silent house, punctuated only by the occasional visit from my lawyer or another federal agent. I felt like a hollowed-out shell, an empty building whose foundation had been destroyed. I had prided myself on my judgment, on my ability to see clearly, to build and maintain. Now I saw only my own staggering naivety, my catastrophic failure. The self-blame was a crushing weight. How could I have been so blind, so profoundly, idiotically trusting? The slow, arduous process of awakening began with a small, defiant flicker of anger, not just at Natalie, but at myself. I had allowed this to happen. I had given my power away. But I also knew, deep down, that I hadn't intended to do wrong. I had genuinely believed I was helping. That sliver of self-truth became my first anchor in the swirling chaos. I decided I wouldn't let her define me or destroy me completely. I started cooperating fully with federal authorities. It was painful, forcing myself to recount every detail, every lie, every moment of my profound gullibility. But it was also cathartic, a way to reclaim a small piece of my agency, my precise memory, my meticulous records. Ironically, the very traits that made me susceptible to her manipulation now served as a powerful tool in dismantling the gang's network. I provided crucial information about timelines, project locations, the specific data she had requested, which, combined with their own intelligence, led to several arrests within the gang. It was a long, draining process, but slowly, painstakingly, the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, and the true scale of their operation and Natalie's role came into focus. Eventually, the federal agents cleared my name of criminal intent. They understood I was a victim of sophisticated manipulation. But the scandal, the whispers, the damage to my firm's reputation, it was irreversible. There was no coming back to Christopher and Associates. My partners, my employees, my clients, the trust was broken. I knew what I had to do. I resigned from my prestigious position, walked away from the company I had built from the ground up, the company that bore my name. It was the hardest decision of my life, a public acknowledgement of the end of an era, but it was also the first step towards liberation, a painful tearing away from the life that had been so cruelly tainted. I sold my house, packed only what was essential, and left Denver. The city, once my proud domain, now felt like a cage of memories. I drove north, into the mountains until the roads narrowed and the cell service faded. I bought a small isolated cabin, surrounded by towering pines and granite peaks. It was remote, quiet, and profoundly lonely at first. The first few months were spent in a daze, a kind of self-imposed exile. I just existed. But the silence, the sheer vastness of the wilderness, slowly started to seep into the cracks of my shattered soul. One day I saw an old forgotten set of carpentry tools in the shed. I picked up a chisel, felt the weight of it in my hand. It was raw, honest. So I started to build. A simple workbench, a sturdy chair, a new shelf. There was something profoundly healing in the physical act of creation, in shaping wood with my own hands, seeing tangible results. No hidden agendas, no layers of deception. Just the straightforward beauty of grain and joinery. It was a stark contrast to the invisible, intricate manipulations that had undone my old life. In the rhythmic rasp of the saw, the scent of fresh-cut pine, I began to find myself again. I learned to trust my instincts, not with blind faith, but with a cautious wisdom, tempered by experience. I learned to differentiate between genuine vulnerability and calculated performance. The paranoia slowly receded, replaced by a quiet vigilance. My heart still had its scars, but it beat with a newfound resilience. Over time, neighbors from the nearest small town, hearing about my carpentry, started asking for custom pieces. I built a reputation for honest work, for solid craftsmanship. The feeling of purpose returned, not the grand world-building purpose of an engineer, but a smaller, more grounded one. And then an idea started to form. A small construction company, yes, but different. Focused on community projects, repairing the local church, building accessible ramps for the elderly, constructing a new playground for the town's children. Projects where the impact was immediate, tangible, and unequivocally good. Projects where trust was earned face to face, plank by plank. I called it Mountain Forge. It's still small, just a few local hands, but it's growing steadily, honestly. We focus on rebuilding, not just structures, but a sense of community. I've realized that true strength isn't about protecting others from unseen dangers, but about building with integrity, both internally and externally. Integrity isn't something someone else can give or take away. It's a personal constant, a core you hold onto, regardless of external betrayals. Sometimes, when the sun dips below the peaks, painting the sky in fiery hues, I sit on my porch, a cup of coffee steaming in my calloused hands. I think of Natalie, of Jamie. I wonder where they are, what life they built with the pieces of my shattered world. The anger is mostly gone now, replaced by a profound sadness for the man I was and a quiet gratitude for the man I've become. I lost everything I thought defined me, but in doing so, I found a truer self, forged in the fire, of betrayal and tempered by the solitude of the mountains. I am Christopher, the carpenter, the builder, and this time I'm building for real.